What's up, all the folks joining us live here on another live edition of Locked On 49ers? Is this iteration, this version of the San Francisco 49ers defense in 2022 the best in franchise history? And what about those playoff teams? Who do the 49ers, who should they not want to play? And we just saw a couple of them on Sunday Night Football. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you, as always, at BD Peacock, at Eric_Crocker on Twitter. Thanks for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. I was a little surprised, Croc, when I heard former 49ers safety Donte Whitner say that he thought the 2022 San Francisco 49ers was the best in franchise history because he was on one of the best defenses in franchise history. We got to go there on today's episode. We're going to talk a little bit in a bit how, what these teams look like. Giants, Washington, Seahawks, obviously the 49ers just beat on Thursday, and the Detroit Lions, what teams the 49ers should want to play against, the crazy comeback from the Vikings, how that 2 seed is looking, basically the playoff picture in the NFC. But first, what about this 49ers defense? Is this the best defense in franchise history? Is it the best defense in NFL history right now, Croc? Because nobody's scoring on it.
I find it very hard to argue with Donte Whitner, a guy who was actually on those 2011, 2012 teams, 2013, just the years that he was there. That was a defense where you compare this team to that defense. And if he's saying that this team is the best in that kind of era, I don't know about ever, but just at least in that era, then it's hard to kind of go against that. I am going to push against that just because when I watch them and I see a defense that is playing terrific right now. They are playing lights out. I mean, look what they did to Tom Brady. And talk about the 2012 teams. I watched the 49ers play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they didn't do what 49ers just did to Tom Brady this year. Now, older Tom Brady, offensive line beat up for Tampa Bay. But regardless, I just felt like it looked different. It looked different. It felt different, even in games where maybe the defense didn't have their best outing, but just watching them run around, fly around. You talk about playoffs right now and who the 49ers don't want to play. I know back then you did not want to have to play the New Orleans Saints, but that game ended up being a shootout. But I don't know, it still didn't feel like, oh man, this defense is overmatched. It still was high flying, big hits, knocking the ball loose. Donte Whitner, Deshaun Goldson, Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, Aldon Smith, Justin Smith. I mean, those guys, they were special. I'd say maybe this defense just, I don't want to call them overachievers because of how well they are doing. But I guess if you were, to kind of pick off guys off of each team, who would you end up with more of?
That's my whole thing. And I'm surprised Whitner said that being on that defense. And just the other day, there was a replay which made it fresh in my mind, which made me think of kind of talking about it on this podcast. And we'll go further back and talk about some other defenses. But that 2012 defense that Donte Whitner was on, there was a replay on NFL Network of the 2012 playoff game with the Packers and the 49ers. And, Colin Kaepernick set a record for rushing yards for a quarterback in that game. That's the thing that everyone remembers. But I was kind of thinking about that 49ers defense and watching all the players out there, and Aldon Smith and Justin Smith and Ray McDonald and Ahmad Brooks and obviously Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman. And then you've got Donte Whitner. You got Deshaun Goldson. You had Carlos Rogers at corner. You had Terrell Brown at corner. You had Chris Culliver. That was a really good team. And I think if you stack up player by player, I still think the 2012 team was better because even if you look at where the 49ers are the best right now in 2022, I mean, it's hard to put Fred Warner ahead of Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, right? And it's
So,
hard.
so are we asking the wrong
Bosa.
question?
Yeah.
Should the question be should the question be about the coaches? Should it be more about who's utilizing their talent better between Fangio and DeMeco Ryan? Should we dare ask that question?
Well, you mean future 49ers defensive coordinator Vic Fangio? We're going to find out. We'll find out exactly what Fangio could do with this group next year, maybe.
Oh, what? Rico in the chat right now. He says Huff is better than Deshaun Goodson. Don't get me started.
Hawk's going to be mad about that one.
Because the Hawk, that's my guy, right? Deshaun Goodson, for whatever reason, they talk about him almost like they talk about Hufanga, which I think is kind of like wrong. People think he just can't cover. And we've talked about some of the mishaps in the secondary, which I think he's getting blamed because he's the closest defender when really he's kind of the last line of defense that you see. And I don't think it's necessarily him. But Deshaun Goodson, they do the same thing where it's like, oh, he's a liability in coverage. I'm like, what? This dude is picking off passes, knocking away passes, forcing fumbles. The playmaker that we've seen Talanoa Hufanga to be, and it's like, man, I've been waiting for a safety to do this because, Jimmy Ward, Tart, not real big turnover guys. Deshaun Goodson was that. Deshaun Goodson was the guy who had 6 interceptions in 1 year and jarring the balls loose and knocking guys out. So we cannot say that Huff is just you could say he's as good if you want to go that route, but come on, Goldson was an all-pro.
I'm trying to think of a game in 2012 that the 49ers defense allowed 44 points like they did this year against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that team was more consistent. But what this latest stretch of 6 games that the 49ers have put together in 2022 is crazy. And I'm not sure the 2012 defense match what they're doing right now. Like just right now today, how this team is playing on defense for the 49ers. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. So, but that's why I was kind of surprised to hear Whitner say that. For him to because a lot of players don't want to give credit to the next generation of guys, or at least put it ahead of what was going on in their time. And I'm surprised Whitner's didn't say something like, by the way, I love Donte Whitner. I think, Croc, would you agree? One of the best 49ers analysts there is out there. And for sure, number one swag 49ers analyst. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have to. I already knew where you're going with it. Well, one, we've been doing this show together long enough. We can kind of finish each other's sentences, right? I think we're to that point in our relationship. But yeah, best dressed easily. But his analysis is really good. And there's something about a guy who played football at a very high level, right? Because you guys get, not saying the poor man version of that, but I played football at a high level, but I was not Deshaun Goodson in the sense of my career, the knowledge that he's gained playing in multiple schemes and systems, the guys that he played with and how great those guys were, and then being able to articulate that on a show week in and week out. I think he does a terrific job.
Debbie in the chat says 2 different decades, but the current defense is the best in the NFL at this point in time, in my opinion. I don't think it's even close because somebody else in the chat earlier talked about how many points the 49ers have given up, 62 points in the last 6 games. And the Dallas Cowboys have given up 72 points in the last 2 games. And people were talking about, is the Niners defense better? Is the Cowboys defense better? It's like, what are you talking about? They're not even, it's not even a conversation right now. Like the Niners have by far the best defense in the league right now.
We've been arguing in my group chat about the 49ers and Dallas Cowboys, and anytime both of our teams are good, the group chat is just lit up. And my big brother, my boy Devin Mays, they are diehard Dallas Cowboy fans, and they just like to just get on everything about the 49ers and talk about, we scored so much points, and you guys only put up 13 points against the New Orleans Saints, right? And it's like, but you guys score points, but look how many points you guys giving up. You gave up like 37 points to the damn Jacksonville Jaguars.
40.
Right? So, okay, you can score points. That's great. But if you can't stop anybody, what's the point? I mean, this is almost identical to last year. The Dallas Cowboys, number 1 scoring offense, number 1 offensive total yards, and then you run into a big bad defense with the 49ers and you get beat down. And it's so stop overrating having just this high-flying, explosive offense, but when you run into a defense like the 49ers, you're going to be in trouble. So, yeah, Dallas Cowboys, a ton of points that they've given up. I'm not impressed.
I'm not super impressed either. And I think any team in the league can be beat. right now, but I think there's clearly some teams that you don't want to be playing right now. I think the 49ers are one of those teams, and let's talk about a few of those who we think the 49ers should want to play, maybe not want to play when it comes to the playoff seeding. The miraculous comeback from the Vikings that ruined the Niners' opportunity to already jump into that 2 seed right now, still have an opportunity with a few more weeks to play. But before we get to all that next, Croc, I still want to throw out a couple other defenses and talk about some of the best defenses in franchise history. And we'll see if we can come to a conclusion where the 49ers might rank amongst some of those all-time groups. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Fortunately, life does not come with a user manual. When it's not working out, things are not going as you would like them to. Sometimes you feel like maybe it's a little stuck, and it's normal to maybe feel stuck sometimes. And you want to get yourself unstuck. That's where therapy comes in. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills. And when you start to learn those coping skills yourself and start to get yourself out of those situations, there's no better feeling. It makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere, 100% online. Everyone deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. As the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online, more accessible and more affordable, along with that convenience of online therapy. And if you don't like the therapist you're matched with, you can switch super easy anytime. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain when you're hiring that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Utilize the network of over 800 million people that are already on LinkedIn, and you're not going to want to have for your small business 800 million people applying for your jobs, but you want to know where all the best people are, and that's where just about everybody is already anyway at LinkedIn. So all you do is you put your job on the purple hiring frame on your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Then you utilize simple tools so you don't get all 800 million at once applying for your amazing job and your amazing opportunity, right? Screening questions make it easier to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Croc, when it comes to the 2022 defense versus the 2012 defense, before we talk about a couple other defenses here in 49ers franchise history, do you think it's harder to play defense now with the rules than it was back then? I saw somebody in the chat bring up the Pierre Thomas hit and the knockout blow from Donte Whitner. Was it easier to bully opposing offenses in 2012 because it was kind of anything goes and you could do whatever you needed to? Now you kind of have to kind of tiptoe around certain hits. I feel like the game has changed so much in 10 years, but I would buy the argument that it's more difficult to play defense now. I was going to say back 7, but man, the Bosa sack. I mean, come on. Last week, right? The Bosa sack that got called back and it was a pick 6. That's a huge play in the game. That would have been nothing back then. That would have been nothing at all in 2012, right? So I think it's probably harder to play defense now than ever before.
Yeah, I think it's progressively getting harder. And I mean, you stopped at 2012, 2011, and we keep mentioning the 2012 team, but that Pierre Thomas hit, that was 2011 season.
That was 2011.
So we see,
I'm kind of thinking of the same group of dudes. I'm just thinking that era's defense, the best defense there versus this best defense. And you could probably just
lump them together.
Yeah, and I wouldn't lump 2019 and 2022 together necessarily. I think there's too big of a gap and there's different crossover. But would you agree 2022 is better than 2019? Because I think it is playing at a better level right now, even though there were some really good players on that 2019 team too.
I'd say it would be 100% no-brainer if you have Emmanuel Mosley out there. I think without Emmanuel Mosley, you can at the very least have some type of conversation, because when they were clicking, right? When there's Nick Bosa out there and D Ford and Quan Alexander with the energy he brought, and
Forrest
Fred
Buckner.
Warner, and I mean they were, smothering, right? They held the Vikings to what, 10 yards rushing? Dalvin Cook 10 yards? Like they were pretty damn good. Even what they were doing in Kansas City. And I get that kind of meltdown at the end of the game. And some of it, I feel like, shit, you get a first down by the offense late in that Kansas City Super Bowl,
no.
then everything else doesn't even happen. But just how they consistently made Aaron Rodgers look, and holding the Chiefs to 10 points through 3.5 quarters, like that defense, man, at its peak, they were good. D Ford coming off the edge, they were good. But as far as the difficulty just playing defense, it's progressively getting worse. A lot of people forget this, but illegal contact used to not be a thing. All right, the illegal contact, the NFL had the same rules as high school and college, which people don't really know this as much right now. There is no illegal contact in college or high school. So what does that mean? As long as the ball is not in the air, you can push a guy. I can chuck a receiver as long as the ball is not in the air in high school and college. And you used to be able to be physical like that with receivers back in the day, and up until they came out with the illegal contact rule. Now, I don't know when they adopted that rule, but I'd say it had to be in the last 15 years, right? But that just made it so much more difficult, because now if you just touch a guy, you're liable to draw a flag. And I know a lot of people are complaining about the refs from the Sunday night game where there was a clear, should have been pass interference in the end zone, but it wasn't called. But overall, it's tough to play defensive back now more than ever, whether it's the illegal contact or if you just hit a guy too hard. If it just looks like it's too hard, and then you talked about Nick Bosa, if you sack a quarterback too hard, I don't know what they want defensive players to do.
So do you have are you leaning one way or the other with 2022 versus 2012, 2011?
My heart, I don't know if it's my heart or my head or whatever. This team is playing lights out, but I just can't go against the 2011, 2012. I just can't go against them.
There's just so many good teams, and I wouldn't fight
player for player. I would pick the 2011 squad.
Yeah, I would too.
I feel like.
Mm-hmm. And even
how can I say I would pick player for player that, and with as good as they were, what they were known for, but then say, no, I'm going to go with the 2022 team.
And even where the 49ers are at the best with those positions, that other team had great players, like Hall of Fame level play happening. Whether or not guys ended up getting to the Hall of Fame for various reasons is another story. But like, you were getting crazy production from the same spot that you're getting crazy production now from Nick Bosa, crazy production from the same spot that you're getting production now from Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. It's pretty close. It's pretty darn close. I would probably lean to that 2011, 2012, those defenses over this one. And maybe it's just nostalgia. Maybe we need to see how that run finishes for these guys too, because they've got a few more games to put their stamp on the all-timeness. Going back to 1994, though, going back to the last time the 49ers hoisted a Lombardi. What about this defense? Bryant Young, Hall of Famer, and Dana Stubblefield in the middle. You got Dennis Brown, Ricky Jackson on the outside, Lee Woodall, Gary Plummer, Ken Norton Jr. linebacker group. You got Deion Sanders, prime. You got Eric Davis on the other side. And then you got
the best version of Deion Sanders that we've ever seen, right? The only time Deion ever won Defensive Player of the Year. 6 interceptions, ran 3 back for touchdowns, man. Come on.
It's probably the best cornerback play we've ever seen in NFL history. You had Tim McDonald, Merton Hanks behind him. You had Hall of Fame defensive lineman in Bryant Young, 3 really good linebackers. Again, different era, going even more sort of smash mouth and slower linebackers, right? And different eras be harder to play in some ways. Dion would definitely be able to play in this era. I think, in fact, that whole defensive backfield would be able to play in this era. Bryant Young for sure would be able to play in this era. And who knows, he might be thought of more like even on the level of what Aaron Donald is right now, if it wasn't for the broken leg that he had in his career, because that dude was straight up dominant, but didn't put up, 20 sack seasons like Aaron Donald. But that's a really good group too. And I wouldn't fight anybody that said that was the best defense.
I wish I remembered those teams more. My age of 35, I am going on 36. I'll be 36 in May, but it's very faint. And for whatever reason, I really remember the next year, like when Dallas Cowboys played Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl. I remember that extremely well that year and on. But the 94, 95 team, it's kind of a blur. Like I remember it, like I watched it, but don't remember it as well as just the next year. And that might have just been because I was like 9 years old. And then it's like going to 10, it's like you're just a little older.
And if you want to start counting Hall of Famers, Croc, what about Ronnie Lott and Charles Haley and that back-to-back 88-89 team? You've got guys like Michael Carter, nose tackle, Kevin Fagan, Charles Haley, Keena Turner, Tim McKyer, Eric Wright, Ronnie Lott. That was a crazy group too. I think it would probably finish a little bit behind some of these guys, but they also had the best safety of all time in Ronnie Lott and one of the best pass rushers of all time in Charles Haley. And I think that's what we're seeing is a lot of these teams had just amazing, at least one amazing, like all-pro level, and some of them multiple all-pro level caliber defensive linemen, guys that could kill the other team's quarterback. And so if you want to build an awesome defense, I think that's where you start. I think we already knew that, but looking at some of these best defenses, I think that's pretty clear here too.
I saw someone mention the 1984 team went 15-1. I mean, listen, guys, I'll never pretend to know something that, if I don't know something, I just don't know. I don't know anything about the 1984 team. So, but they said that was the best.
Yeah, it gets lost because their record was so good, but that one doesn't have the nostalgia of the other teams as much because there's no Jerry Rice, there's no Charles Haley, there's still Joe Montana. Young Roger Craig is on that team in 84. I'm looking at it right now. He's still got Dwight Clark and Freddie Solomon out there at wide receiver. Here's the defense for that team in 1984. You got Jim Stuckey, Manu Tuiasosopo, Dwayne Board, Dan Buns, Ricky Ellison at linebacker with Jack Reynolds and Keena Turner. The young Ronnie Lott still playing corner back then with Eric Wright at the opposite corner. And then at safety is Dwight Hicks and Carlton Williamson. So some familiar names there, but aside from Ronnie Lott and little Keena Turner, little Eric Wright, I don't remember watching those guys.
Hicks too.
Hicks, yeah. Yep, Dwight Hicks and the Hot Licks, they called that secondary.
Do you think that the 49ers in that 2011, 2012, 13 run, the secondary was a little underrated, or just the defense in general? I think people know how good they were, but you had the Legion of Boom. I saw someone put it in there just during that era, you had the Legion of Boom, and they got all the kind of the shock value, and they were good. I mean, they were damn good. But do you think that the 49ers, especially the secondary, because everybody looks at that secondary like, oh, they weren't good. I'm like, what, y'all? They were good. They were good. Like, they could play. And were they as good as Legion of Boom? No. But I think as a defense as a whole, like, they were good. I think they had a little bit more down moments than Legion of Boom, because Legion of Boom, it was just always up. And Russell Wilson, it was just like, hey, Russ, just don't screw this up. And he's like, all right, yes, sir, I won't just screw it up.
Here we go. Here's a good factoid from the chat. Ronnie Lott, Eric Wright, Carlton Williamson, and Dwight Hicks all made the Pro Bowl, only team to have all 4 DBs make it. So there you go.
Wow.
That is a good stat there. By the way, so that 2012 team, the offense too was crazy. You had Frank Gore.
Kinda.
You had Frank Gore. You had a two-headed monster at tight end with Vernon Davis and Delaney Walker. You had Michael Crabtree and Randy Freegan-Moss at wide receiver. You had an offensive line of Joe Staley, Mike Iupati, Jonathan Goodwin, Alex Boone, and Oh, who's right tackle? Oh, Anthony Davis. Like that's an amazing team when you think about all the players they had, their best 22 in offense and defense.
And Colin Kaepernick was pretty dang
And he was
dangerous.
so hard to play against, and especially in this game, watching him run wild for 178 yards or whatever it is against the Packers. You know, you can see why that team was a Super Bowl caliber team. And unfortunately, they weren't able to win that one. Okay.
They were a little undisciplined. They were a little undisciplined in that Super Bowl.
I'm going to say that I'm going to say if I had to rank them out, I'd go 94-1. I'd go 2011, 2012 next, then 2022. Then 84 is just too hard to. I love that stat about the Pro Bowl secondary though, but I think the front seven is a little behind some of the other. And they have some really good players, but a little behind some of the other teams there.
I talked about underachieving a little bit, and definitely Greg Roman with that offense. Like, bro, what are you doing? How do you underachieve with those guys?
Well, they had to play a certain way too, and I noticed in this game, by the way, and I kind of remember it at the time. But Randy Moss, I don't think was super happy about the offense and about seeing balls sail over his head from Kaepernick, because Kaepernick had that crazy arm, but he threw everything so flat, and he tried to hit Moss deep a couple of times, and it just wasn't happening. And you could tell there's a little frustration there. And I do remember him not loving going over the middle either, and it was just like kind of a weird stylistic fit with the 49ers, but he actually looked better than I remember as far as like how he was moving. Like he was still an asset out there, even though he was semi-washed. But anyway, all right, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about these playoff teams here and get out of here and maybe have some fun in the chat next. PrizePicks is daily fantasy played easy. Maybe you're not in those fantasy playoffs, and so you'd like to have a little bit more fantasy in your life. Well, you can play fantasy every day. It's why it's called daily fantasy at PrizePicks, and it couldn't be easier. All you do is you pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on that entry, and you're not playing against a bunch of other people. You're not playing against fantasy sharks or some of these fantasy games you're playing against 1,000 other people at one time. No, it's just you versus those projections that they have at PrizePicks. Tons of NFL projections to pick against, or NBA, NHL, golf, college sports, motorsports, combat sports, esports, you name it. You can find projections every single day at PrizePicks, and those entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Remember, you're only picking 2 to 5 players and picking if they'll score more or less than those PrizePicks projections. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com right now and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100.
Peacock.
Yeah.
You see this question right here? All right, before we get into that stuff, you want to answer this? I think this is kind of fun right here.
This one's from Slime9 Official. Who's one past defensive player you all would want on this team right now? Well,
let's just go back to 2011, 2012.
Okay, so we can't go Deion Sanders to put across from Charvarius Ward right now. As good as Yamador Lenore's been playing good, man. And he unfortunately he should have had that pick 6 on the board, and that one got taken off the board. It was totally bogus. Yeah. They got to look at that kind of penalty. But if we're only going back a decade, who would I put on this team?
It's easy for me, Aldon Smith.
Oh, I'm gonna say Justin Smith, because I would say they need more interior help than edge help, even though Aldon Smith was freaky. But a lot of what Aldon Smith did, his brother from another mother, Justin Smith, helped him out a lot when he would just bear hug 2 dudes and Aldon me go, whoop, I'm going right around. I'm gonna stunt through this.
Yeah, no, but he kicked some guy's butt too. I mean, he was flying around. When you ask any offensive lineman from that era, like, hey, who is the toughest guy? Yeah, there's Aldon Smith. Everybody, it's always the same answer. Everybody says Aldon Smith. So I think he gets this because there were times when Justin Smith was out and maybe he wasn't as productive, but every offensive line you talk to or you hear talk about it, they always say Aldon Smith. Like, they hated going against him. They talk about how much of a freak he is, and everyone that was covering the 49ers during that time talk about how much of a freak he was, even at practice, where it was like they couldn't even run plays because they could not block him. And we just talked about how great that O-line was, and they couldn't do anything with Alden.
I'm not going to argue with Alden. Either Alden or Justin Smith, I think, are the clear answers there, because even with Willis and Bowman, and Patrick Willis, one of my all-time favorite 49ers, like, they wouldn't improve the team as much as those other two guys would, I think, just because the 49ers are already really good at linebacker.
Yeah. I like that Justin Smith pull, though.
Yeah.
I was tempted to say Deshaun Goldson, but
I know that's your dude. So we just saw the Giants and Washington Commanders play Sunday Night Football right before we jumped on live here. And thanks again, everybody, for jumping in with us live and having a lot of fun on a Sunday night, even though the 49ers didn't play Sunday this week. Like, they're ugly, Croc. Like, I would not be at all afraid. Look, anybody can beat anybody. I would not be at all worried about playing either the Giants or the Commanders in the first couple of rounds of the playoffs. Like, not at all, right?
Well, one thing that was very clear, especially about the Commanders who the 49ers are going to play this weekend, they could not protect Taylor Heineke. And there was a lot on his shoulders. I've talked about how I was like, hey, man, like, Taylor Heineke reminds me of Brock Purdy. Like, when I watch Brock Purdy, I see Heineke. And when you watch the game, did you see it?
Yeah.
When you watch the game?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of Brock Purdy in them, but if just imagine Brock Purdy that is under duress every single play and has to figure out how to make plays. And he has some terrific receivers, but
you know what's weird is Purdy doesn't have a great arm, but he throws a better ball somehow. You know what I mean? Than Heineke. Like, I think.
You think so? I think they throw the same ball.
I think,
and it's not a knock. People will hear me say that, and I know everybody's throwing out these comparisons of Brock because we're just trying to figure out who he is. Yeah. But they'll hear that and they think that that's a knock, and I'm like, no. There was a time 2 years ago when I watched Taylor Heineke in the playoffs playing for Washington against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he was going toe-to-toe with Brady. And it was just like, man, this guy's scrappy. He's gritty. All of the adjectives that you would use to describe Brock Purdy, you were using those to describe Taylor Heineke going head-to-head with Tom Brady in the playoffs. And I remember after that year, I'm like, Jimmy Garoppolo, this dude keeps getting hurt. Can't trust him. You keep having losing seasons. I'd rather pay Taylor Heineke his $800,000 or whatever it is, as opposed to pay Jimmy Garoppolo $27 million, right? So that's a nod in favor of Taylor Heineke. So when I say Brock Purdy, it's like, man, it reminds me of Taylor Heineke. Like, his play style, his grit, he's flexing out there. You know, he's threw a touchdown. He's like, yeah, let's go. I'm like, it's a replica of him, but just want to, you know, and no slight against Purdy, but just Purdy's on a better team, better situation, better coaching. The play's set up a lot better and better protection than what we saw Heineke have. And hopefully Heineke is under that type of duress against the 49ers this Saturday.
So the question becomes, and I think I would probably put the edge as it's, who is it here? Shades by Chardal says Giants are better because of their coaching staff. I think I'd agree. So I'd probably rather play Washington than the Giants in the playoffs. Would you rather defend against Saquon Barkley or be worried about like Kayvon Thibodeau against Mike McGlinchey?
Yeah, that's tough. I still feel like I would rather play the Giants because I feel like the 49ers can make them way more one-dimensional. They play more into the 49ers' hands. 49ers, like, they are terrific against the run, right? Where that's the biggest thing that the Giants have going for them. Aside from a defense that can make plays, Kayvon Thibodeau, he's coming on extremely strong right now. But the receivers, and I love Isaiah Hodgins. Shout out to my guy Isaiah Hodgins. Worked with him a few times back in California. But their receivers are a little underwhelming as opposed to Washington. Washington, they have some guys that can go get it, man. You see McLaurin, playmaker. Dotson, playmaker. The kid out of North Carolina right now, Dami Brown, he's starting to come along. They're trying to stretch the field with him. It just, there's a little bit more dangerous there, but then they don't have the offensive line to protect the quarterback. So, but I'd still go with, I'd rather play probably the New York Giants if you're telling me I had a choice between the two. I do want to say this, though. A lot of people are like, Brock Purdy, he's more poised and he's not as kind of erratic as Taylor Heineke. But that's because of, you know, they can't protect Heineke. So everything, it's all like when it's on you every single play and you're running for your life, of course it's gonna look like you're not very poised.
That's a good point here. Chase Young probably won't be back next week. could be back next week against the Niners on Saturday. Unlikely, but much more likely he's there in the playoffs against the 49ers. So
I think they thought he was going to play. They thought he was going to play Sunday evening.
Yeah.
So I think he will be playing against the Niners.
Yeah, he might be back next week. More wide receiver talent for Washington too. I don't know. I'm not worried about either one. Would you rather play one of those two teams or the Detroit Lions right now, who started off 1-6, have since gone 6-1, and my math tells me that that's 7-7 now that those Lions are, and they're in the thick of things as well. Niners have already beaten the Seahawks twice, and those felt like pretty comfortable wins. I don't think I'd want to play the Seahawks again necessarily just because they're the Seahawks. But any of these teams you're going to get at home, right now I'd probably rather not play the Lions just because of how they're playing. And they might be able to put up some points somehow. Although Goff in a hostile environment against pressure isn't necessarily a good recipe either.
Here's the thing about the Lions. If they just got slightly better defense earlier in the year, their record would look a lot different. They lost a game where they scored 45 points on offense. And that was the team where early in the season when
right?
And I was trying to figure out, like, with the 49ers, like, how are the Lions scoring so many points with whoever the hell their offensive coordinator is, and 49ers with all these weapons, you can't score points. That was kind of my thing, but they were losing games because they couldn't stop a nosebleed. They couldn't stop anything, right? And now they're starting to get some stops. And, what do you know? They're getting some wins. Now, defense still is pretty weak, but they have enough on offense that's going to definitely keep them in games. And Aaron Glenn, shout out to Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn, when I was with the New York Jets, Aaron Glenn was a scout. He was actually a scout. He wasn't coaching. I think sometimes they make guys have to work their way up. So he was the guy I would check in with, when we arrive, when I'm leaving. He'd say, hey, this is where you're at, et cetera. But now, obviously, defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. But they look bad early on. I'm like, Aaron Glenn ain't going to make it. Starting to get some stops now. So very, very interesting team. We see them rattling off wins. They could be good. They could have been good all along if they would have just got a couple more stops here and there. Now they're getting them. So it's resulting in a little bit more wins.
As of right now, it's looking like a collision course potentially between the 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles. I think those are the two teams in the NFC you don't want to play against. I think the Cowboys are kind of there, but have kind of stumbled a little bit defensively the last couple of weeks. We just saw what the 49ers did to the Cowboys last year. The Cowboys are going to have to go to the Niners this year. And can the 49ers overcome the Vikings and earn that 2 seed and make sure they're a home team no matter who they play, unless it's the Philadelphia Eagles in the playoffs? And that comeback was crazy. Matt Ryan, maybe Kyle Shanahan's off the hook, right? Because Matt Ryan's now – because now you blame Matt Ryan because you saw the 28-3 and everyone blames Kyle Shanahan. And then Matt Ryan loses a lead that's even bigger. And
33-0 at halftime.
Nothing. I left. I took my son to because I already watched too much football on Sundays. On Saturdays, usually my family day a little bit more. I was like 33-0. I'm getting the hell out of here. I took my son to the park. I get back into the car from the park and I hear Dalvin Cook to the end zone. It's a tie game or whatever. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? So then I was like, these stupid Vikings. Now I got to go back and watch this crap and see what happened.
Yeah. So I hosted my tryouts, my inaugural 7-on-7 tryouts this weekend. And I was watching the game a little bit on my phone. I'm training kids. All right, let me see you backpedal. Okay, let me see. Oh, man, this game is over. It's the first quarter. And they're just, they're down 2 scores. They fumbled. I'm like, it's over. I checked the score at halftime. It's 33-0. I play the little video that I play on. Everybody always hits me. Croc, play the video. Play the video, Croc. You know the video. Everybody hits me and tells me to do it. I play the video. And then like my tryouts were over. We're up. We're talking about who we want to keep, who's going to make the team, et cetera, me and my buddy Malik. And I look at my phone and I say, Malik, it's a 1-score game. He's like, no way. I had to rush home. And then it was tied. By the time I got home, it was tied. Amazing, amazing comeback. And who do you credit more? The sorry Colts who just found a way to lose, or Kirk Cousins in that offense who Kirk ended up throwing for like almost 500 yards and 5 touchdowns or whatever it was?
Yeah, so I had a good buddy that texted me at halftime, and Kirk Cousins had negative points. He had like negative half a point at halftime, and he ended up with like 42 fantasy points at the end of the game. But my buddy called me at halftime. He's like, well, I'm screwed. I'm out of the playoffs. I'm going to lose. And then by the end of the game, he had a crazy amount of points. Wow. That's wild. But you weren't wrong to think that because every single other team in NFL history won that game, except for the Colts Saturday.
Right. Crazy. Sorry for bad teams find ways to lose. I always say it, and you don't think it's going to be to that extent, but it definitely was Saturday.
Does that mean
a lot of good games? When you look at the games this weekend, there were a couple. Obviously, the 49ers versus Seattle, that was very intriguing, even though 49ers were like favorites on the road. Buffalo and Miami, which ended up being a great game as well. But there weren't a whole lot of games where you look and say, man, I can't wait to watch this game. Dallas Cowboys versus Jacksonville. Like, you don't want to watch that. Yeah. But then you watch it and you're like, wow, amazing game. You watch the Colts against the Vikings. Wow. Like, there were just so many wow games. This might have been the best weekend of NFL ever.
So this is hilarious because Cousins always sucks in prime time and sucks in the playoffs, but he's 3-0 on Saturdays. So maybe he found his magic, Kirk Cousins, on Saturdays. Don't want to play the Vikings.
When did he play the 49ers against the Vikings versus 49ers? Was that on the Saturday divisional round playoff game, or was it a Sunday? Because that doesn't count against his record because it's postseason, but he for sure lost that game.
Yeah, I don't remember. We got to get out of here. Vikings, real quick, because you said bad teams find a way to lose. Does that mean the Vikings are a really good team because they keep finding ways to win? Because they keep winning all these one-possession games.
I think that they are not bad.
Their defense
don't know if they're good. They have the worst pass defense in the NFL.
They're basically the Lions. But what's crazy is the Lions got in such a crazy hole, and the Vikings went 7-0 to start the year. But I don't see that big of a difference between those two teams right now. I'd give the edge at quarterback, and they've got the better receiver in Justin Jefferson, obviously. But
do you get the edge to the quarterback? I see Link 1879 in the chat says Kirk versus Coach Saturday, but between those two quarterbacks, who do you get?
I take Kirk.
I don't know if Kirk is better than Goff.
I don't know if it's a crazy tier ahead, but I'd definitely take Kirk over Goff.
Because when Goff was with the Rams, I don't think we would say that. So when you saw him with a just better team, and he was pretty good, right? The same way we talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, all he does is win. Well, Goff was doing that and actually throwing for 4,700 yards and winning a bunch of games and going to a Super Bowl and doing all those things. Then he goes to the Detroit Lions. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL, and he's actually been a huge part of really turning that team around. Talked about early on in the season. You lose a game 45-48, but like you're balling. If you're Jared Goff, it's like I did my job. So maybe Goff is good.
I think Goff should be better than he is. I think that's what frustrates me because Kirk gets the most out of what he has. I think Goff doesn't care that much. I don't know him personally or anything. In fact, where I'm at, he grew up like in the shadow of where I'm at right now, in Marin County, California, and he should be better. And he's still like this skinny little kid. Remember how Tom Brady changed his body? Like, I feel like there's something missing with Goff where he's just like, I'm going to go out here and sling it and whatever. If we win, that's cool. He's not that glass eater guy where Kirk is just built different mentally, but Goff has a way better arm than Kirk Cousins, I think.
Yeah, talented. Number 1 overall pick. And there is something to that, right? Like where you are taking. That doesn't mean that you're going to be the better quarterback, which I'd say history kind of shows when you look at Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, just kind of the tier of quarterbacks in the NFL. Typically, the first round guys, the high picks, are the better quarterbacks. But there are some of these guys that have worked their way into being a legit starter, and Kirk Cousins is one of them. But typically, you slide in the draft, and there's no off-field issues like Dak Prescott, who got the DUI during the draft part. But for the most part, there is a difference in talent. But some guys are just able to overcome that, and we've seen that with Kirk Cousins. So for you to say, well, I think Goff has the better arm, yeah, that's why he went number 1 overall.
Yeah, and Kirk Cousins was the 4th rounder. Yeah.
Right.
We got to get out of here. Thanks, everybody, for jumping in the live chat with us on this Sunday night. Croc and I will be back tomorrow. Of course, we'll talk Commanders. Get ready for this game coming up Saturday on Christmas Eve and take you all the way through the season as we do. Make sure you're tuned in to everything on the network. Locked On Sports today. The Peacock and Williamson NFL show, Locked On NFL Draft. Croc and I back tomorrow right here. Locked On 49ers.